Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another week of masterclasses. Today we'll be talking about how the new B patch on 14.3b changed the meta, what minor changes occurred, how to approach the new patch, and then some specific changes to the superfan items. So for those watching live, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know anytime throughout the lesson. And if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to check out the description, join the Training Grounds Discord channel, and get involved in the community. Okay, so patch 14.3b, as I mentioned, superfan item changes. We'll talk about minor changes that the patch actually entailed. They didn't want to change too much because of the upcoming competitive season, where we're in the middle of it, actually near the end for regionals. And then the Superfan Flex Strategy that I think will be really relevant, especially on this patch, now that Heartsteel has been nerfed. A little bit of a spoiler there. Okay, so 14.3b, the first one I'll talk about is undocumented change. So if you played ladder or even like just check Twitter or any like TFT like YouTube channel or anything, you might have already noticed, but there has been a change to Karthus's superfan item. So it used to be Archangel Staff, which was really not good on him, especially with the change of him getting more AP the more times he casted. So that like the longer the fight goes for him, the more AP he gets, which is basically what Archangels gave. So you're kind of just doubling up on a stat there instead of spreading out your stats. It got changed from Archangels to Adaptive Helm, which is actually a really good item on Karthus. It sometimes could substitute for Shojin if you did not have Shojin as a mana gen item, but also if you paired them both together, then that's even better, because mana gen is just extremely good on Karthus with his recent change. So basically going from Archangels to Adaptive Helm is super good. His actual stats has changed from about a 4.34 to a 4.24, so you can see that this did benefit him and he is now placing higher on average, so very good. This is technically a buff to the Pentacle comp, and I'll be talking about more of that at the end. They also fixed the superfan headliner item bug. I don't think it occurred too often, but if you saw any, like, you would make you would see items continuing to stay after you put in superfan, especially from that headliner item. All those bugs are gone and everything should work according as planned now. So the main takeaway here is the change to Karthus. It is now Adaptive Helm instead of Archangel's Staff. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. The second one, we're going to get into the actual changes that were listed within the B patch. So the first one I'll talk about is Heartsteel. So if you check out the Heartsteel multiplier, you'll notice the only number that it changed is the 5 Heartsteel. So we have 3, this is normally 3, and then we have 5, so it went from 2.25 to 2. Now you may think that this is not too big of a change, but the multiplier from 3 Heartsteel to 5 Heartsteel is actually quite a bit, and now it is simply just doubled. It used to actually be 3, I believe, at the start of the set, maybe during PB, so we can really see how much this has changed all the way from 3 to 2. And although this seems very small, a 0.25, you have to remember that this is a heart multiplier, which means that it's actually a lot bigger than just like 0.25. And this means that the stage 4 breakpoint cash out intervals, they're heavily affected. If you want to check out the specific numbers, feel free to check out, I believe his name is Clement Chu on Twitter. He made an amazing post about it, and it shows a little bit more info on the actual intervals. But now you are no longer as heavily rewarded from either just full on win streak or like win lose, or like any of those conditions starting on stage 4 with 5 Heartsteel. And then in the previous patch, as I mentioned at the very end here, the stage 5 plus hearts were already nerfed. Additionally, adding that with our previous set nerf, and then also our Z nerf, Heartsteel definitely is no longer the S tier comp we have come to love. I think it's still good because the actual combat of it is, well, technically, like, set nerf did not really do anything. I think it was like 50 HP and a bit of damage, and you didn't really do damage anyway. The Z nerf does hit because it is a dual carry comp with Zed and Ezreal, and the reason why it hits a bit harder than the Kale or the Riven changes is this is his base AD, so it really goes into and affects his scaling. So just going from even 1 to 2 star, or just how his AD scaling works with his ability, he just does less damage, and Zed doesn't have any CC, so a pure damage unit doing less damage is pretty rough. So I'm not exactly sure where to place it. Maybe at an A, sometimes low A if you don't if you don't have BIS everything, but definitely not as rewarding as before this Heartsteel comp. Additionally, Kale and Riven both got a slight nerf. So Kale nerfed again. Previous patch, I think it was either 30 to 25, or I think actually it was 25 to 20% attack speed. Now her ability on hit damage is slightly nerfed, so not too much. You can barely notice it at 2-star, and you'll notice it a little bit on 3-star. However, as I'll talk about on the next slide, a bug fix that actually quote unquote compensates for Kale's nerf, but we'll see about that after. And then the Riven ability damage, another 5% on her AD, which kind of feels bad because she was at 100 before 90, and then they changed it to 90, and now they changed it to 85. So just a lot of nerfs. What does this mean to the Riven comp? It means that it's really going to be more punishing to stabilize at a 2-star version of Riven. Just dealing less damage means that you'll heal less, and then this means that you have less frontline for your backline to do damage, and Riven will just die faster. Of course, this is only 5% AD, so it's not huge, but it definitely, you may notice it in some fights. The Zed nerf was definitely larger than the Kill and the Riven nerfs. I explained that's why, and this is because of his base AD, and that's it. So these are the minor changes incorporated into the B patch. I would say the major thing is just the nerf to Heartsteel. It is basically a double nerf here from 5 Heartsteel and also the ZAD, bringing the comp down from S to maybe like A, maybe even lower. I'm not 100% sure how to rank it. I have to check it a bit more, but all these nerfs combined is pretty rough. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about some more minor changes. So now we're talking about like augments and bug fixes. So 2 augments that have been disabled: extended play. This is, I would say, it is quite an OP augment for Punk. The fact it technically could just give you infinite gold and then just so many components was just really broken. So that has been disabled. Also, Heartthrobs, it was bugged, I believe, to only work for wins, and I don't think it worked for losses. I think that's how it worked, but regardless, they disabled that. So both of these augments you don't have to worry about anymore. I'll talk about the bug fixes. So you may have noticed scrapping inventions, it give you the components at the start of the next 2 rounds instead of the next 2 stages. So that's why it was so incredibly broken. It was averaging like a 4, maybe a 3.9 something. So that has been bug fixed. Now the components come at the start of the next 2 stages instead of the next 2 rounds. So it's no longer super broken. It's just very good, and you'll be still able to most likely 5 win early game if you have a good opener on stage 2, but it's no longer like an insta 5 win and then you go into stage 3 already like super juiced up. So that's been fixed. And then the second one I talked about, there was a bug where Ginsu, the Rageblade stacks, would reset when York casted his second ghoul, I believe. So this affected Kale a lot because if you know, Kale's Superfan item is Rageblade. And then I think this would only affect the second Rageblade, or if a unit had 2 Rageblades. So then if Kale had 2 Rageblades and then you also played a York, the second Rageblade stack would reset. So that has been fixed. So technically we got a little bit of a Kale damage nerf, but we got a quote-unquote like buff from fixing her Ginsu Rageblade bug with York. So maybe Kale is just net 0. Her average placement did not change too much from the previous patch. So yeah, that's good to know. Okay, so we talked about the Superfan item changes of Karthus. We talked about some minor changes that the actual patch entailed, mostly to Heartsteel, Kale, Riven, Zed. Talked about extended play being gone, so the Punk augment, Heartthrobs being gone, Scrappy and Ginsu's are fixed. Now we're going to finish off with the approach to the patch, which I believe a Superfan Flex Strategy is just going to be really strong. So you're basically going to play around this core 4. This will change a little bit, especially if you're playing Pentakill. Then the Superfan units will change a bit. You drop cannon for Gnar. But regardless, for most of the comps in right now's meta, this is fine. So Lilia, Kennen, Nico, Echo. If you want to see the not full list, but a good list of Superfan comps to play, feel free to check out the 5 comps to play on 14.3. Within this channel, I talk about a lot of different Superfan comps that are applicable right now and how to play them with BIS, positioning, augments, everything. So I want to talk about any comps in specific. This regarding, I guess, reroll for the specific video, but basically the whole flex strategy is look out for these units. Playing Superfan early game, even mid game, is just so good because it gives you a full free item on your headliner. So it's already a unit you want to itemize because it gets bonus stats, and then it's a free item that's catered towards them. So just playing around Superfan is really good. Free item is free item. And then just throughout the game, depending on what items you get from your drops, from your monster drops, what units you natural, what augments come up on 2-1, 3-2, you could decide, okay, do I want to reroll a 1, 2, or 3 cost with my Superfans, or do I want to play around 4 costs? So if you have, let's say, a really good Katarina angle, then great, play Superfan Katarina. If you have a really good Seraphine angle, then play Seraphine Superfan. But let's say that you're just playing tempo, like either your win streak tempo, this will most likely be the case because if you're win streak tempo, then it's a lot better to like push levels, tempo, try to get 4 costs, and just punish the rerolls early before they get their 3 stars. So let's say that is the case, right? You want to play around the 4 costs. So what you could do is you could eventually transition those Superfans into either Ari Warriors. I'll talk about how to play that in a second. Pentakill Karthus or Disco TF. I put Disco TF in italics because the transition into Disco TF, I think it's fine to play Superfans for like 1 turn, maybe even 2, before you fully transition into your Disco units and like hopefully your Alawi, because the Superfan item for TF is Rabadons, which is really good on him, and you could just play like Lilia for Sentinel, Kennen for Guardian. Like, it's not even bad. Playing it for 1 or 2 turns on like either 4-1 or 4-2 is acceptable. The fact that it gives you a free Rabadon, so that's why it's in italics. But basically, for all 3 of these comps, the reason why playing Superfan is so good, I already mentioned, early to mid gives you a full free item on a unit that you already want itemized, and then transitioning into stage 4, you just keep them, right? So let's say Ari Warriors, right? We already have Kennen, Nico, Lilia. They stay here. And then in Superfan, or in Pentakill, we have Nico, Lilia. We will drop the Kennen, and then we'll play our Gnar. So very easy transition. We already have like 3 out of 8 units that we'd want. 4 if we're counting the Ari with the Echo. And it's very easy transition. So for our first one, Ari Warriors, the whole base of this is you're going to be playing around, technically, I guess, these 5 units. And then you will just basically play whatever you hits on your level 8 roll down. You don't want Ari to be your chosen or your headliner. So ideally you want to get Ari2 just from picking up 3 copies of Ari instead of hitting a headliner, and then play around either a Poppy, a Kali, Zed, or Viego, and then put your filler units to fill out the traits. So if you're playing Zed, then you'd want to put in a Spellweaver, so like Seraphine is fine, and then a Crowd Diver, or if he's not already Crowd Diver, or Poppy, just fill in the traits. Technically, she doesn't really need Emo or Mosher. I mean, they're both good on her. I think you would just play around like strong units around her. But Akali, if it's like KDA Akali, then you'd play Akali, Seraphine, and then maybe a Kaisa for 7 KDA, something like that. But basically, you'd fill out the rest of your board based on the warrior that you hit from your level 8 stage 4 roll down, and then their Superfan items: Warmogs for Poppy, Hodge for Akali, BT for Zed, and then Titans for Viego. The really good augments to go with this Ari board: little buddies. We have so many little buddies. We have Lilia, we have Kennen, and then our little buddies can come from just filling out our stats, right? So if it's Akali, then a KD Akali, then it's like, oh, Seraphine and Kaisa, so many little buddies. Poppy, we just play anything we want, like Zed, most likely playing Evelyn. Viego, we could play like a Gnar, or Gnar or Kale, depending if it's Edgelord or Pentakill. So little buddies, plenty of little buddies, and then a lot of big buddies. Vampirism, just good augments. Healing is never bad, and then HP on everyone. And then Jewel Lotus, just a really good damage item, or damage augment to really spike her board. So very consistent, and if you're playing this from a win streak position, it's almost impossible to bot 4 if you have like decent items, because you're guaranteed to at least hit something. If you roll like 30 gold on level 8, 4-2, or even like 4-1 if you're super rich, you're guaranteed to hit something, and then you can decide whether or not you can go level 9 or if you need to actually get your RE2 online. So that's our Warriors. And then our very last thing we'll talk about for today is like the Pentakill comp, which I won't talk about too much because this comp has been around for like a month and a half now. Augments, little buddies. Once again, we got our little buddies, Lilia, Gnar. Actually, not too many little buddies, but a good amount of little buddies, and mostly because we have a lot of big buddies, so like Akali, Viego, Yorick, Karthus, that all benefit from this. Vampirism, same thing. Healing is just really good in the Pentakill comp, so like Harmless is very good too, and then Metalheads, of course, because we're playing vertical Pentakill. The very last thing, remember the Archangels is gone, so now picking up Headliner Karthus actually does not feel that bad. Like adaptive, we'd want to be building adaptive on Karthus anyway, if we didn't have a Shojin, or you could pair it with Shojin as well. But yeah, this is fine. Like, make sure you have a damage item, make sure you have some healing reduction. If you have like a red buff on your KD Akali, then you don't need Morello. You could just put in a Shojin, or like swap something out for an Asher's. It's totally fine. Just play whatever you have. Items are very flexible. Just make sure you have some sort of healing reduction, some sort of mana gen, some sort of AP damage, or AP item to amplify with pentakill. So I think that's it. Pretty quick class today, 20 minutes, but basically this was just a meta analysis on the new B patch. So I already summed up everything beforehand, but basically the Superfan Flex Strategy is just playing around Superfan. You can play early, mid, and late game. Early to mid, just play whatever your strongest board is, and whether this be Superfans plus like Pentakill, and then you have like Olaf as your headliner, or like mid game you're playing around like a Senna, and you have like KDA in or something, and then late game or even mid game you can decide, oh, do I want to reroll? Like, does my spot allow it? Do I have best in slot for my reroll units, or do I have augments? Like, if you get hologram, then it's like, oh, I already have super fans, I just roll for Lulu on 4-1 or 3-5 depending on how rich you are. Or if you're playing from a tempo spot, or you just don't have a good spot to reroll, then you can play around 4 costs. Look for Ari if you have like a blue buff, Nashers, and then look for your AD melee headliner, or like Pentakill, especially if you have spats, and even Disco if you have a good Disco spot, or if you have an Alawi, which is pretty high roll. So that's it. I think play around Superfan is going to be extremely good this patch, and that's everything. So I'll end the recording here, and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions.